Okay, thank you. If I can just indicate, ask you to indicate that you're here. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Buchanan. Not here at the moment. Councillor Callacase. It's not here.
Hilary, there's a wee note in the chat. She's having difficulty getting onto her laptop this morning.
All right. We
So
will
join us as
follow
soon as
that
you
up.
can. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Callaghan.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
I'm here.
Councillor Carmichael.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor Chalmers.
I'm here.
Councillor Cornbury.
Here.
Councillor Cooper. Councillor Corbett.
I'm here.
Councillor Devlin.
Present.
Councillor Faulkner. I can see Councillor Faulkner.
Here.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Councillor
Sorry.
Faulkner. That's good. Councillor Ferguson is here. Can I just confirm that both the interpreters can see and hear me?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Yes, we can.
Councillor Fulton.
Here.
Councillor Gray.
Here.
Councillor Greenshields. I can see you're here, Councillor Greenshields. Councillor Holford.
Here.
Councillor Lennon. Councillor Logan.
Yes.
Councillor McGavigan.
Here.
Councillor Razak.
Morning, here.
Councillor Shearer.
Here.
I have apologies from Councillor Stevenson, and Councillor Horsham is here in her place.
I'm here, Hilary.
Thank you. Councillor Wark.
Yes, here.
And finally, the Chair, Councillor Wilson. Also in attendance, the officers this morning are Daniel Lowe, Annette Finnan, Frank McCafferty, Hazel Goodwin, Lorraine O'Hagan, Elaine Maxwell, Margaret Mary Cairns, Lynn Wiley, Pauline McCrae. And that concludes the sederent. Thank you, Chair.
Hilary, I'm here, Margaret Cooper. I don't know if you got me.
Oh, I didn't. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Hilary. We'll move on to the agenda, and hopefully those that are having technical issues at the moment can join us over the course of the next few minutes. So agenda item 1 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If there are none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, agenda item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting? If there are none, I'll move them as a correct record.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the monitoring items. So agenda item 3 is the capital budget monitoring for the period 2020-2021, excluding the housing revenue account, and it's Lorraine that will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm having IT difficulties this morning, so I'm on my phone, so can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Yes, thank you. Okay, item 3 then is the Housing and Tech Capital Monitoring Paper, as you say, excluding the HID. This is the third capital monitoring report for housing and technical resources this year, and the purpose of the report is to provide members with an update on the annual budget, as well as the level of spend to the 1st of January, which is our accounting period 10. And for the first time this year, we'll bring in the usual predicted spend position to the end of the financial year, so to the end of March. Section 10 gives you the background and explains how the budget has been set for the year. So the main point to note is the revision to the programme, where we had changed the budget from the last report to committee back in November. and that's due to adjustments which have been agreed at Executive Committee in both December and also last week, the 10th of February meeting. These adjustments total a net decrease of 4.492 million and are noted in Appendix A of the report on page 18. This has taken the Housing and Technical Resources Capital Programme for the year down to 6.529 million. Section 5 of your report details the financial implications. So Section 5.1 notes the revised programme for the year being 6.529, with the spend to the 1st of January of 1.433 million. Section 5.2 notes the outturn position against that revised budget, and it's an outturn of 5.1 million, so that's an underspend of 1.4. Now, the majority of that underspend is in relation to the timing of spend across a number of projects where the budget is required in 21-22 rather than in the current year. The progress of a number of projects has been impacted by the ongoing lockdowns due to COVID-19, and the main projects that are affected are detailed in Section 5.3, and they include the multi-year programmes for prioritisation investment, Central Energy Fund, and the Civic Centre Fabric Upgrade project. If I can refer committee back to the recommendations in Section 2 of the report and ask that committee note that the Housing and Technical Resources budget of 6.529 will get spent to the 1st of January of 1.433 and an anticipated outturn for the year of 5.1 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Are there any questions from members? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the capital budget monitoring for the housing revenue account for the period 2020-2021, and Hazel will speak to this report. Over to you, Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide information on the progress of the Housing Revenue Account Capital Programme, and we're covering the period 1st of April 2020 to the 1st of January 2021. As Lorraine noted, this is the third time we're reporting to committee in the current financial year. Members will recall that the capital programme was revised down to 48.172 million, and that was just to reflect the level of project deliverability that we could achieve in light of the COVID-19 emergency. Appendix A to this report provides further details, including funding sources. At section 5.2 of the report, we note that the revised estimate reflects the delays due to initial lockdown and also the continuing restrictions on the programming and undertaking of works. In terms of the actual spend to 1st of January 2021, that was 27.039 million. That includes a recharge reflecting the fixed overheads of the property services internal contractor. I could refer members back to section 2 of the report. Ask committee to note the revised capital programme of 48.172 million and the expenditure to date of 27.039 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. Are there any questions from members? I can't see any hands. Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the revenue budget monitoring, excluding the housing revenue account for the same period 2020-2021. And Hazel will once again speak to this report. Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. Again, the purpose is to provide information on actual expenditure against the revenue budget for housing and technical resources, excluding HRA, period again up to 1st of January 2021. And again, third report to committee for the current financial year. There are 4 appendices to this report, A to D, providing details of the financial position. And you'll remember that includes an additional COVID-19 costs, and we detail them now at Appendix D. At section 5.1 of the report, we note that we have completed the Council's formal probable outturn exercise, and using the information there, we are forecasting an overspend of 1.147 million up to the end of the financial year at 31st of March. That's mainly relating to those additional costs of the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of the period up to date, up to 1st of January, we're seeing an overspend of 0.491 million against the phase budget. And again, that's due to those additional costs of COVID-19. The things involved in there, there's additional expenditure for temporary accommodation for homeless people, additional costs for additional health and safety for employees and also service users. Just reminding committee again that the COVID restrictions have also had an impact on that property services section, which provides property investment, repairs and maintenance service to the HRA and other resources, capital and revenue budgets. And given that that section continues to incur overhead costs, we're required to offset them by income recovery. So there's a charge in here for that. Again, if I can refer members back to section 2 of the report, committees asked to note the current overspend of 0.491 million, note the forecast overspend to 31st of March 2021 of 1.147 million, and also if you could approve the proposed budget variance included in the appendices. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. Are there any questions from members? No. Okay, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, agenda item 6, the revenue budget monitoring public housing revenue account for the same period 2020-2021. And Hazel will once again speak to this report. Hazel.
Thanks again, Chair. Cover the purpose of the report to provide information on actual expenditure against the budget. This is the HRA side this time, and covering that period up to 1st of January 2021. Against the third report we've brought to committee. And again, if I could point you to section 5 of the report where we detail the financial implications. Again, formal probable outturn exercise being completed. We're forecasting a break-even to 31st of March. We also have a break-even at 1st of January 2021. This reflects the slight difference, obviously, in the HRA account, whereby the COVID-19 costs have to be managed within the overall HRA finances. So they won't show an overspend relating to those additional costs. That will be included within the budget there. Just in terms of that impact of COVID-19, we continue to monitor that. Earlier on in the year, there was a reduced volume of repairs due to the initial lockdown. Demand then increased back again through to December 2021. And obviously this report only takes us up to 1st of January 2021, so we're in that period. Again, we'll continue to monitor as we go through the impact of the current lockdown. There continues to be an increase in rental debt levels in comparison to previous years, so it's likely to increase bad debt provision levels at the year end. In addition to that, the annual rental income projections that we originally had haven't been achieved, and that's due to the lockdown COVID-19. We expected a number of new properties to be completed, and we haven't got to those numbers quite yet. So there's a slight shortfall there, but that's a timing delay in terms of what we'd assumed within the budget. Again, just noting that impact on the property services section that provides the repairs and maintenance service. So there are costs in here for those non-variable costs included in this. So again, if I could refer members back to section 2 of the report, ask you to note the break-even position as at 1st of January 2021, also the forecast break-even position to the year end, and also again, if you could approve the budget variants that are included in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. Are there any questions from members? I don't see any hands. Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, agenda item 7, which is the workforce monitoring report, and Elaine will speak to this report. Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. You'll see this as a standard workforce monitoring report, which is prepared by personnel, and that provides the purpose of the report is to provide committee with an update on the employment information for the period of October to December of last year for the resource. You will see at section 4.1 that the resource absence figure for December 2020 was 3.9%, and that represented a decrease of 0.6% when compared to the previous month. And that figure is 1.7% lower than the council-wide figure. Based on the absence figures as at December and looking at the annual trends, the projected annual average for the resource for 2020-2021 is 3.8%, which is compared to the council-wide average of 4.4%. You will see that it's noted that the absence figures contained within the report include absences related to COVID-19, and at the time of the report being written, the council's absence percentage was 6%, with 2.11% related to COVID, and that was both for sickness and special leave. As an update, I have the figures that were produced as at the 10th of February, and the position is now that the council's absence percentage is 4.65%, with 1.53% related to COVID for both sickness and special leave. Moving on to section 4.2, there were 133 occupational health referrals made during the period. You'll see this as a decrease of 85 when compared with the same period of last year. Moving on to section 4.3, there was one accident incident recorded within the resource for the period, again showing a decrease of 8 when compared to the same period of last year. Section 4.4 details the employee relations activity, showing that there were 3 disciplinary hearings held during that period. Section 4.5 details, looking at Appendix 2, that there were 5 leavers during the period eligible for an ex-interview, with 1 ex-interview being carried out. Section 4.7 shows that 24 employees left employment, with 23 being replaced and 1 post not because it was due to the end of a fixed term contract. So I would refer committee back to section 2 within the report and ask for the report to be approved with recommendations noted for the employment information for October to December of last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions in relation to the report? I don't see any hands. Okay, so can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, agenda item 8, which is the Housing and Technical Resources Q2 Progress Report, and Annette will speak to this report. Annette.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides committee with a Q2 progress report on the resource plan for the period April to September 2020. The plan for the year was approved by committee in September 2020 and sets out the objectives and the actions to be managed and delivered this financial year. The plan is based upon the objectives set out in the Council Plan Connect and reflects the aspirations of the community plan. The key objectives are noted in Appendix 1, and an update on progress is noted in Section 5 and Appendix 2 of this report. Some actions and areas of performance have inevitably been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The plan has 58 measures overall, and at the end of Q2, 44 measures were on target, 3 were slightly behind target, and 1 was behind target. 10 others are contextual or will be reported later. Section 5.3 highlights the key achievements to date, including completing the first annual review of our rapid rehousing transition plan, meeting all demand for adaptations in council homes, and progressing the local housing strategy priorities, including increasing the supply of social rented housing despite the restrictions and the impact they had earlier on. Section 5 notes that one area of improvement where there's been a slippage against the target. This relates to the completion of annual gas safety checks, which were delayed due to the impact of COVID-19 restrictions and tenants isolating. An action plan is in place to address the outstanding delayed checks. Committees then asked to approve that the resource plan for Q2 progress report, as summarised at 5.2 and in Appendix 2, be noted, that the key achievements noted at 5.3 be noted, and that the area for improvement at 5.4 also be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annette. Are there any questions in relation to the report? I see one hand. Yep, it's Peter Craig. Sorry, Poppy Corbett. Councillor Corbett, would you like to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question on the gas safety checks, Annette. What is your plan to try and get up to date with them? Because I noticed certainly with private landlords, there's no extension to the gas safety certification. So what is your actual plan to catch up to the 865 that haven't been done?
Thank you, Councillor Corbett. Annette.
Councillor, can I let Frank McCafferty answer that, please?
Thanks, Annette. Councillor, we had a plan in place towards the end of last year to catch up in our gas safety checks. As you know, when lockdown happened in March, we slightly changed our process to reflect the guidance given by both the HSC and the regulator, where we are required to make our all reasonable endeavours to have the gas safety check but we were balancing that with obviously the safety both in terms of our tenants and our employees. So we stopped our forced entry programme. So where we couldn't get where we couldn't get access to carry out a gas safety check, then we weren't then going and forcing entry to make sure that happened to meet our legislative requirement at that point. So what we did, we've got a separate team now that's involved in that, and they're continuing on to make inroads into the gas safety checks, and we're hopeful that we'll have them all back up to date by the end of this financial year.
Thank you, Frank. Is that okay, Poppy?
That's great, thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'll bring Councillor Brown in.
Thanks very much, Chair. I was curious at 532, it talks about the level of rent arrears as being significantly below the target, which seems, later on in the next report, we're asking for more money to be laid aside for rent arrears. I just wondered how the two related, because I would have actually expected in the current climate we've got, with all the difficulties of COVID and things, that you'd see the opposite trend, if you like. Is there any background that's interesting on that aspect of it?
Annette, would you like to come in on that point?
Yeah, I can give committee a bit of an update on where we currently are with rent arrears. You can imagine that it's been quite difficult this year to project what the outturn would be, given that we've seen significant increases in tenants claiming universal credit, particularly at the very beginning of the financial year, as COVID restrictions and furlough commenced and people being made redundant, and we've seen that fluctuate up and down during the year. So forecasting has been a bit more challenging than normal years, but I can report that at the 7th of February, rather, we were sitting at £1.17 million higher in rent arrears than the corresponding period in the last year. Rent collection has recovered really since Q2. We're seeing income collection figures increasing, and we're currently sitting at 98% collected. So we are seeing a recovering position, but it's, as I say, it's hard to forecast where we will be at the end of the financial year. Just now, 32% of all tenants are in arrears of some sort, and the average arrears is slightly higher than it was the same time last year. So we've got a picture of the rent, but as I say, it's difficult to forecast where we'll be because of changing circumstances.
Sorry if I can come back on that, Chair, if I may. I mean, the query really was, if that's the case, why in the next item are we looking for an increase in the provision? Are we expecting this to deteriorate for whatever reason over the course of the next period? Is there some background to the, if you like, the apparent discrepancy between the good rent arrears recovery situation reported and going on till February and what we seem to be needing for next year?
I think, Councillor, it's every year we try to be as prudent as we can and make sure we make enough provision for bad debt. The forecast earlier on in the year was that arrears would be higher than they are just now. So if we take that prudent position, we want to make sure that we've got sufficient in the bad debt provision. We are seeing an improvement since September, October, but that's not to say that that will be continued into year end. And we are at almost, well over £1 million higher than we were at the same time last year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring in Councillor Convery.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question, it's a comment. Just following on for what Frank McCafferty just said there about the gas, which is very, very important. I just hope that the guys that are doing these jobs are going to get the vaccine, because we're asking people to get into people's houses, and if they're not vaccinated, that could cause problems further down the line. But we need to get the gas certificates up to date. That's essential, obviously. So I'd ask, Chair, that maybe be looked at. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure that we have the power. I'm sure that's a joint vaccination programme that will be in charge of that, but I know Danny would like to come in here, his hands up.
Yep, thanks for that comment, Councillor Convery, and that is something that we're looking at. So Again, it goes back to the Joint Committee for Vaccinations, which we are following that route map, and that's been picked up and coordinated through social work. And Frank would confirm that to you as well, that we are pushing as much as we can to get what we consider to be our critical parts of the workforce who are engaging with tenants and residents on an ongoing basis to push them up the chain and to push that forward. So that's something we're very hopeful of moving forward.
Chair, could I have a supplementary to that?
Yeah, of course you can, Jerry.
Yeah, Chair, with all due respect, and Danny's doing a good job, and I'm not criticising anybody here, but as the 5th biggest council in Scotland, we should be making representation, because we've got workers going in and out of houses, and it's, the First Minister quite rightly says stay at home and work from home. We've got folk that can't do that. They've got to do emergency repairs, they've got to get into people's houses, and to me, these people should be vaccinated in the wider picture. So if I hear what Danny's saying, but maybe down the line, the Chief Exec will need to write on behalf of the councillors of South Lanarkshire to get this thing addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Your comments are noted. Are there any further questions?
Sorry, Chair, could I just have one more comment?
Yeah, of course you can.
And it was just to pick back up on Annette's comment then, just about rent collection and dealing with that. And I suggest maybe Annette's been just a bit modest in terms of her service and doesn't want to use a bit of self-praising that. But I would just think we should take the opportunity to recognise the sterling work of the team in managing to get our collection levels back up to the level they're at just now. They've done a really good job over the course of the year to get us into what we consider to be a really good position, considering all the challenges that we're facing, and that's something that we'll continue to work on going forward. So it was just to say to just recognise the work of the team in getting us into this position.
Thank you, Danny. Are there any further questions? If not, can we agree the recommendations? Thank you. I'll move on to the items for decision. First item, agenda item 9, the housing revenue and capital account budget for the year 2020-2021, and that is Annette that will speak to this report.
Sorry, Chair, it's actually
Oh, sorry. Right, okay. It's just on the crib sheet, it says Annette. Okay, sorry about that, Annette. Danny, would you speak to this report?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So similar to previous years, and as you picked up at the start of the meeting, despite the number of difficulties that we've faced as a result of COVID restrictions, we've managed to undertake really good consultation with tenants on the proposals for the year ahead. And that's led through the Tenants Budget Scrutiny Group. And I think it's only right and proper, and it's a good point for me also to recognise the work of that group and also their contribution to the development of the proposals that we're putting forward in this paper this morning. The consultation that takes place with tenants then over the piece considers both the housing business plan and also our work priorities going forward. And our work priorities are remaining fairly consistent with where we've been in previous years. So it continues to be increasing the supply of council housing, continue to make sure our stock achieves the Scottish Housing Quality Standard and is maintained to that level. But that we continue to work to make sure that our stock meets the energy efficiency standards for social housing. We've also got legislative compliance works, and this year that also includes fire safety works, additional fire safety works and improvements that are needed by this time next year, and also environmental works. And in order to meet these priorities, then we're proposing a capital programme of just under 101 million, which is the largest programme we've had for a period, and is summarised in Appendix 2 of page 67 of your papers this morning. So in order to help fund this programme, then a rent increase is needed. And members, you'll remember in previous years then we'd agreed a multi-year approach with tenants, and that helped tenants both with their budgeting and it also helped the council with their budgeting too. This year, however, though, in light of the continued financial uncertainty as a result of the pandemic and its impacting on many of our tenants, we reviewed our plans. We were actually into the consultation process and we reviewed our plans. And as a result of that, then we reduced our proposed level of rent increase, so from 3.75% to 2.2%, and we've taken that forward as a one-year strategy. In section 5 then, the report highlights the consultation that's taking place, which was done in partnership with both the Budget Scrutiny Group and the Tenant Participation Coordination Group. And it also then feeds back the kind of key points from that consultation. And what I really noticed is that both groups are fully supportive of the 2.2% increase for 1 year, and with a commitment thereafter to return to a multi-year approach. The groups acknowledged that this was the minimum level then that we needed to maintain our service standards and support ongoing investment in our stock. They accept also that the increase is considerably less than the 3.95% increase that we've had in the previous 3 years. And most importantly, they also consider the increase to be fair and allows us then to continue to invest in our existing and our new housing stock. In addition, we also carried out an online survey, and encouragingly, I think, despite all of the difficulties, we managed to get 1,385 returns, which is fairly consistent with the level of returns we got last year and is way higher than what we've been getting in the years before that. And again, just to summarise these, 48% of the returns that we received supported the proposed rent increase, 77% supported a 1-year approach for this year, 74% of returns suggested that rents were either good or very good value for money, and 90% of returns strongly agreed with the investment priorities that we've included in our programmes. So all, I think, really good and really encouraging. I think it's also important at this point just to reference elected members back to paragraph 3.6, which is in the paper this morning, which provides context on South Lanarkshire Council's rent levels. And what it highlights is that based on the 2019-20 Scottish Housing Charter returns, South Lanarkshire has the 7th lowest rent of all local authority landlords, and in addition we've also got the lowest rent of all social landlords operating in South Lanarkshire. Just to go back to the points that Councillor Brown and Annette were picking up in the previous paper, then, as in previous years, then the budget makes provision for the impact of universal credit, etc., on rent collection and arrears, and we've made a provision of £6.922 million to cover bad debts. That's based on our projections of what we think we're going to need next year. It's taken a prudent approach, but we'll continue to review that throughout the course of the year. And if there's a requirement to adjust that up or downwards, we will inform members of that as part of our regular finance reports to committee. So it's something we'll keep a very close eye on. One of the other proposals in the paper include for the conclusion of rent harmonisation, which is outlined in paragraph 3.5. We started that process way back in 2007 for members that were here and can remember. And now all but 56 of our 25,007 homes are on a harmonised rent. So we are 99.75% there towards getting this done. So if we take our standard approach that we've adopted in previous years of the agreed rent increase plus £2 per week extra, that would leave us still 10 tenancies short of being harmonised. So really the kind of very end, and we're really dealing with a really de minimis level, and it's something that we just need to kind of work through with them on an individual basis. So to deal with this then, what we're proposing to members this morning is that we're proposing to uplift the rent on the 10 properties that would remain after that by between £3 to £4 a week, in addition to the standard rent increase for the next 3 years. And that will mean then that all tenancies will be on a harmonised rent by 2023-24. So a long piece of work it's took us to get there, but hopefully that gets us to the end of the road and gets us onto that harmonised level. The budget that we're proposing this morning also includes for £324,000 worth of efficiency savings, which we note in paragraph 3.7. Members will be aware then and will note that these 3 proposals are under consideration by elected members as part of the Council's general revenue budget for 2021-22. So there's a financial impact on what members are considering as part of that budget on the HRA. The final approval of the general revenue budget and any savings that members determine that they wish to take as part of that will be agreed through full council on the 24th of February. So if there is any change to, or that savings are not proposed, or there's any reductions in the 3 areas that are referred to, or delays to their implementation, that will require a corresponding reduction to be made to the planned capital programme that I referred to earlier, so that we set a balanced budget. So in concluding the report then, members have been asked today to approve the recommendations which are set out in section 2 of the paper, which are that the proposed rent increase of 2.2% is applied to all council houses, gypsy traveller sites, lockups and garage sites, and that the final stages of rent harmonisation, as detailed in paragraph 3.5, are approved. That based on the 2.2% increase, the 2021-22 capital programme, as detailed in Appendix 2, is endorsed, and that the recommendations being made are referred to the Executive Committee for endorsement, then on to full Council for approval. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Danny. We've got a few hands up. I'll take Councillor Callaghan first.
Thank you, Chair. Just really wanted to welcome the capital programme, Danny. Thanks for your report there. And also mention the completion of 506 properties, which I believe is a record for the council. So fantastic news there as well there. I think, you know, we all understand the impact in our lives, every single one of us, that having a comfortable home, a quality home, makes to us. Particularly now during the pandemic, when we're spending quite a lot of time at home. We're all really appreciating that feeling of security and safety that it brings for us here. So our homes are much more than just buildings. They're places where people can be safe and where they can thrive and they can move forward. So thanks for all the work that your team have been doing. That said, I think we'll all be quite happy to be getting out your homes a bit more quite soon. Fingers crossed. Thanks.
Absolutely, Steph. Okay, Councillor Brown, would you like to come in?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I think we'd all echo Stephanie's last point there, to say the least. Could I welcome the report as well, and not least the rent harmonisation thing? I mean, in a way, it's an overhang from the council amalgamations back in 1994 to 5, so it's taken a long time to get there, and I think it's appropriate that we recognise that at that point. That's a welcome development. Can I ask, if I may, 2 or 3 points on the thing? First of all, Appendix 1. Housing repairs and maintenance, a very small point in a way, but we've been having a bit of an issue in our area about bin shelters and people rubbish around them and all that in tenemental blocks in particular. I just wanted to confirm that there would be some provision within that which would enable changes in bin shelter layouts and things to actually begin to tackle some of these issues, which are localized but quite damaging to the environment of the area. So maybe I can just ask that question first, and I'll come to the other more significant points in a minute.
Okay, Danny, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Brown. If there's a repair requirement necessary, or if there are any alterations needed, then we would be looking at that as part of our works programme, either through the repairs and maintenance programmes, through our planned maintenance works, or alternatively through the housing investment programme on its own. So as you will be aware, Councillor Brown, you know that anyway, that in your local area, then we are doing a lot of work in relation to bin shelters in the local environment. We've the ongoing programmes of works for a few years now. So it is something that the local teams would pick back up, just in terms of any work requirements that are required, and then they would feed it back through into the appropriate programmes of work.
Yeah, thank you very much. The most significant point is on the sorry. Yeah, the most significant point is on the capital estimates. Danny would be, I think, surprised if I didn't raise the whole issue of external fabric and environmental issues, which has been a constant feature of what I've had to say on this matter in the past. He was kind enough to provide me with a 3-year schedule on this, and I think, in fact, it might have been quite useful to have had that in the main report as a routine thing, so we can see the development of travel here. But I wonder if I could ask in a general sort of way. There was an indication before that as we move towards the completion of the energy works and things of that kind, that there would be a bit more facility to deal with the environmental works and indeed the remaining external.
Sorry, Robert, we lost you there. I don't know, Danny, if you want to come in and make a comment, just.
Yeah.
Oh, Robert, sorry, you're back. We lost that part of the.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I was going to ask if Danny could give us a bit of background on the position there, any hope for the future on that one, because it's going to take quite a while to sort out some of these environmental issues, and they are actually quite substantially damaging to people's quality of life, certainly in areas of my ward like Spring Hall, he's aware of. Linked to that, if I may, can I ask if there's any kind of overall survey on the remaining fabric upgrading and the extent of it, and for that matter, on the environmental things I've been talking about?
Thanks, Robert. Danny, would you like to respond?
Yep, I'll start off by saying there's always hope for the future, Councillor Brown, so we'll move forward with that. So I would be surprised if you never raised it. It is something we've been corresponding on over the last couple of days, just to go back through that. And it's something where I'm acutely aware of, and as a resource management team, we're really aware of as well, because I'll go back and echo Councillor Callaghan's points when she came in at the start. So whilst it's really good that people get into their homes and they've got nice, warm, comfortable homes to live in, it's also important that the local environment they live in as well is always kept in good condition as well. What we're really conscious of, though, is when we go through the housing investment programme, and I kind of say this looking at year on year, it's key for us then to look at our rolling stock condition surveys, which maybe answers your last question, that we do have ongoing condition surveys of our stock, which helps then to inform our investment needs goes forward, and that's what builds into our business plan. But so we've got an ongoing programme of works requirements. We also know then that sometimes we have life cycle replacements because central heating systems will expire. So there are requirements for us and regulations for us that we need to do. So we need to get our stock up to the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, which we did do. Now it's important that we maintain it to that standard. So for example, if a heating system expires or if windows need replaced, then that's a rolling programme for us then. That doesn't stop when we got to 2014-15 and we can rest on that. It's about then continuing with ongoing cycles of programmes to keep that work going. Thereafter then we had the East standard that we had to comply with, which was a whole bit of work. And what we're always hoping is to think is, as some of these programmes start to tail off, or if some of our if some of our other works that we require to do tail off a wee bit through our surveys and the like, then we will look to think how can we get other works into environmental programmes and the like. I gave you an example, Councillor Brown, when I get back to you in the last couple of days or two, as well as we have now got new regulations that have been put in place in terms of fire safety in our homes, which require additional smoke and heat detectors to be placed in. And over the course then of the last 2 years, and next year we'll be continuing with that, that's cost us probably in excess of £5 million to keep our homes updated. So effectively what I'm saying is, a lot of times there are still new things that are being brought in and coming into play that we have to then build into our business plans. What we also really need to be careful of as well is that we don't overstretch the business plan in terms of our works, and we've got to balance it and smooth out the work requirements, because if we don't, then what's the alternative then? We would need to go back and raise more income through increase in rents, or alternatively, if I got to spend more money in environmentals, I'd need to take it out of other programmes of work. So effectively what I'm trying to say is it is a big balancing act. We've got pretty much finite sums of money we need to work in, so we've got a financial envelope that we're trying to work in terms of the business plan. There are works that is a given that we have got to do because, again, council commitments that we need to make sure that we're increasing our new build stock in line with what we've committed to. We've got the government's requirements in terms of SHQS, EISH, we've got fire safety requirements, and then we've got our own safety requirements as well, just in terms of legislative compliance works. Unfortunately, what that means is that the environmental work effectively becomes a bit of a balancing figure at the end. But what I would say is we are fully committed to making sure that environments are improved. So again, I gave you the 3 years analysis or comparator. So whilst this year or next year, sorry, we're looking to spend £2 million in environmental works, which was less than the £2.8 million we had in last year's programme, it's substantially, it's 45% more than the year before that when we had 1.389 million. So it is something that we will continue to push forward to and continue to try and improve upon. Hopefully that answers it. I think Frank was wanting to also have a come in with some comment on the survey programme.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Frank, would you like to follow on from that?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to add to what Danny said is, Councillor, we have a rolling 5-year survey programme for the externals of all of our houses, which is carried out by the team in a magistrate. So we have a surveyor who will go out and do a survey on each of the properties at least every 5 years, and that, as Danny says, that feeds into our capital programmes. I think to add as well, we've worked really hard to get well over 90% in compliance with the EISH 2020 standard. But we're now looking at EISH 2032 standards. So there's the EISH 2, so there are new standards which we're required to meet by 2032. And whilst that seems a while away, the plans and programming for that and the measures that we need to undertake to achieve that standard are already in place. And it's the crossbar being quite substantially raised within that. So that there are, as Danny says, there are other competing programmes which are already coming in. So we've not just finished these, we're now continuing to work on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Okay, I'll move on to Councillor Chalmers, who's got her hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to add to your opening comments earlier on to thank the Budget Scrutiny Group and the Tenant Participation Coordination Group. I know that they really enjoy the regular meetings and taking part in the budget setting process, and it's obviously been quite a different year for them, but they were undaunted and took part in the virtual meetings right up to the budget setting forum meeting in December. So usually the representatives would come to our meeting here today and we'd be able to thank them personally. So can I just ask two things? One, that you pass on again our thanks to members of that group, but also maybe that, and this might not be something they're able to do or want to do, but at least make them aware that there's going to be a recording of this meeting where they can listen to the discussion to complete the process that they've been taking part in. Thanks.
Thanks, Maureen, and yes, I'm sure we can take both of those things back to the tenant reps. Move on to the next. So, Councillor Faulkner, I believe you want to come in.
Hi, thanks, Chair. It's just to ask Danny, it's regarding new build and the rent harmonisation, and in particular the new technology house has been built at St Joseph's. Now, to access that new technology, you would need to get broadband, which the average costs about £25 a month. Will that be up to the tenant to pay that, or will that be in their rent as part of the rent harmonisation programme?
Danny, would you like to respond?
I think just in terms of the technology-enabled homes, Councillor Faulkner, we are still engaging with social work really to go through that and determine the specification of what the actual technology that will be getting into these homes are, and thereafter we will then make a determination about what's included or what's not included in that. So that's something we're still working through with social work currently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Convery.
Thanks, Chair. Just it's following on from what Danny Lowe had said earlier on, and Robert Brown has raised repeatedly, as other councillors have raised, about environmental. But I take a different line, Chair. This is not a housing issue. This is a council issue. Every department needs to be involved in the environmental part of the landscaping of areas. Robert's right. There's no use Danny's team getting the houses, as Stephanie said, up to scratch, lovely, beautiful, and it says like a bloody tip. But that's no housing's problem. That's a council problem. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jerry. Your comments are noted. Councillor Callaghan, your hand's up. I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand.
Apologies, Chair.
Okay, thanks. There are no other hands up. Would anyone else like to come in? No. Okay, I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second that, Chair.
Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Housing Allocation Policy Local Letting Plans for the year 2021-2022, and Annette will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standard annual report that we bring to committee to advise on performance against the letting targets and also seek approval for the targets and initiatives for the year ahead. Letting plans are a key feature of the allocation policy and ensure a strategic and flexible approach is taken. This takes account of the differences in supply and demand across the local housing areas. Plans are prepared annually for each of the housing management areas, setting out letting targets and the initiatives in operation. As noted in section 4 of the report, the pandemic has had a significant impact on the delivery of services. During this time, however, the allocation of council housing remained an essential service, with the resource working hard and being successful in letting vacant properties safely to applicants in most housing need. Letting was continued during 2020 and into 2021, but the pandemic has had an adverse impact on turnover and the availability of housing, as well as impacting on the level of demand. Section 6 of the report provides an update on the achievement against the letting targets for 2021, projected to year end, and full details in appendices 1 and 2. In general, as a result of COVID the focus has been on priority groups, and consequently it's projected that the urgent housing need target may be exceeded by the year end. The banded targets for sheltered housing will generally be met, with the target for the waiting list being exceeded. Variations at local levels relate to different levels of supply and demand in some areas, along with variations in turnover. Sections 7 and 8 of the report refer to the proposed letting targets for 21-22, which are also detailed in Appendices 1 and 2. The section also highlights the factors which have been taken into account when setting the targets, and I'll just highlight some of them. They include the continuing high level of demand for housing, with over 15,000 applicants on the housing list. Continuing high level of demand for sheltered housing, with over 1,200 applicants on the sheltered housing list. Despite the continuing positive impact of our housing options and homeless prevention approaches, the number of homeless applications remains high, and we're projecting that we might see a 6 to 8% increase on the previous year. A potential 26% reduction in turnover is what we think we'll see, driven down by the COVID pandemic and the restrictions on people moving. The ongoing joint working with our RSL partners and also the contribution of our increased supply of new housing have also been taken into account. Local letting initiatives allow some flexibility in the allocation policy to address particular needs of local circumstances, and Section 9 of the report provides an update on the local letting initiatives in operation during the year and also proposals for 21-22. We propose to retain 5 of the local letting initiatives in operation and remove 1 initiative which was in place in Kelvin Gardens in Hamilton. This initiative is no longer required, given the services provided in that area have now been replaced by the Home Start service, which now operates across the whole service and not just that locality. Full details of the local letting initiatives are attached to Appendix 3. And as noted at Section 10, we also propose to retain the South Lanarkshire-wide initiative introduced to help mitigate the impact of welfare reform. In terms of the next steps, the impact of the targets and the initiatives will continue to be monitored, and we'll report these to committee at a future date. Committee is therefore asked to approve the recommendations that progress against the targets this year noted, that the 21-22 mainstream letting targets be approved, that the 21-22 sheltered letting targets be approved, that the local letting initiatives attached to Appendix 3 be approved, and the South Lanarkshire-wide initiative also be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annette. Are there any questions from members? Yes, Councillor Brown.
Yes, just a brief comment rather than a question. I'd just like to welcome, if I may, the continuation of the local letting initiatives. I know that some of them are small scale, but the one in Cathkin, for example, in my ward, is very, very useful, just providing a degree of local variation that allows people's aspirations to be a bit more satisfied. But that's one wee thing. The transfer figures are relatively low in terms of the percentage of the total, not least in the Cambuslang and Clydesdale divisions. I noticed they're both being raised a wee bit for next year. Given that a transfer kind of releases another house as well, if you follow my point, is that, are we intending to see a bit more of an emphasis on transfers in the forthcoming year? And is that the basis of what we're trying to do there?
Thank you, Annette.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Councillor, as kind of general premise is that while we have to meet urgent housing need, for me, meeting the need of those on the transfer list is paramount, not least because, as you say, it recycles another property. We have to balance this though against the demand and where we have specific needs. This year, more than ever, we've focused on the urgent housing list, and we're currently sitting at 60% of lets going to that list, which includes urgent medical. And it also, we've had, again, during the pandemic, help facilitate some delayed discharge. So we've focused more than ever on that, which has had a counter effect on our ability to let to the transfer list and the waiting list, particularly in some areas. We also saw, though, that the new build lets that we had were delayed, and they've now started coming through. We've let new properties in East Kilbride, and we're now letting in Whittlebone and Cambuslang. So predominantly they have gone to either the transfer list or the other category list, where people were previously housed and were due to come back to Whitlaburn. So that's had a different impact on the profile that you've seen this year as well. So the targets for next year still having a focus on the urgent list, but also trying to recover some of the transfer list as well.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If there are none, I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 11. It's the policy and strategy review schedule, and Annette will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks committee approval for the Resources Policy and Strategy Review Schedule. A formal review schedule has been in place since 2011 and has been subject to regular updates to this committee, the latest being in February last year. The schedule assists with the annual service planning process and links to our activities relating to tenant and customer involvement and scrutiny. The updated schedule reflects changes in the local and national policy context, including legislative changes. The proposed schedule also reflects revisions we've had to make as a result of COVID-19 and the impact on services. The proposed schedule is attached to Appendix 1, and it sets out the details of the policy, the review schedule and the timescale. And Section 4.3 notes the policy areas covered which are consistent with the requirements of the regulator. In addition, the schedule contains key strategies such as the local housing strategy and also the rapid rehousing transition plan. Subject to approval, the schedule will inform future resource and service plans and the annual engagement plan we have with tenants and service users. Committee is therefore asked to approve that the policy and strategy review schedule attached to Appendix 1 be approved, and that the outcome of the policy and strategy reviews that we carry out will be reported to future committees in line with the schedule. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annette. Are there any questions? If there are none, I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, agenda item 12, in relation to the open market purchase scheme, and Annette will speak to this report again.
Thank you, Chair. This report is seeking approval for amendment to the criteria that we have in place for the Council's open market purchase scheme, which is linked to the work that's ongoing in terms of long-term empty homes. The existing scheme was approved by committee back in July 2015, and the criteria for the scheme is noted at paragraph 3.2, which includes that the property must be actively marketed for sale. To help alleviate the impact of long-term empty homes and address some of the financial barriers that some owners face, it's proposed that the current criteria for the scheme be amended to allow consideration to be given to properties that are long-term empty but not marketed for sale. Section 5.2 details the proposed change and notes that all other criteria would still apply. As highlighted at 5.4, any property identified by the Empty Homes Officer as potentially suitable for purchase will still need to be operationally and strategically deemed suitable. Subject to approval, the proposed change will be introduced with immediate effect. Committee is asked then to approve that the additional criterion for the open market purchase scheme, as set out at 5.2, not at 4.1 as it says in your papers, be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annette. Are there any questions in relation to the report? If there are none, I'll move the recommendations.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the South Lanarkshire Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, and Annette will speak to this report again.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides committee with an update on the Scottish Government funding provided to support the implementation of a rapid rehousing transition plan, and also seeks approval to add a number of posts to the establishment on a temporary basis. Progress against the plan was detailed in our first annual review, which we reported to this committee back in September 2020. So I'll not take you through the full details that are in the report, because you've probably heard this before. But included in the update, this included rather an update on the impact of COVID and some of the planned actions and on the proposals for year 2. Section 4 of this report provides a summary of the Scottish Government funding received to date, which I'll just quickly go through. That's £105,000 we received initially in December 2018 to help us develop and set up the plan. 461,000 received in July 2019 for year one, and we then received 453,000 in December 2019 for year two. The Scottish Government has also confirmed that a further £282,000 will be provided in March of this year for actions that we were trying to deliver also in year two. And they've also confirmed now the year three allocation, which will be £445,000. With the Scottish Government funding confirmed for years 2 and 3 of the plan, it's proposed that the staffing structure that we've put in place will continue to help deliver on the objectives and priorities that we've set out. Section 5 of this report does provide the detail of the progress and priorities in year 2, which have been reported previously to you. To support the implementation of the plan, it's proposed that the existing temporary positions, including the coordinator post and 6.2 full-time equivalent specialist housing officers that we have in place to support our work around domestic abuse, young people leaving care, be extended for a further 12-month period. To support the further development of our Housing First approach, it's also proposed that we have 2 additional housing support officers appointed on a temporary basis. And to further support the homelessness reception and assessment service, it's proposed that 1 additional team leader be appointed also on a temporary basis. Section 6 and 7 of this report outline the full employee and financial implications, and I would advise that, as noted, the full costs will be fully funded through the rapid rehousing funding received from the Scottish Government. The committee is then asked to approve that the content of the report be noted, that the proposal to extend the contracts for the coordinator and the housing officers be approved, and that the proposal to add 1 full-time equivalent team leader and 2 housing support officers to the establishment as detailed in section 6 also be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annette. Are there any questions in relation to the report? I don't see any hands. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda item 14, which is in relation to housing support for Blackwood Housing Association tenants at Angela Way in Uddingston. And Annette will speak to this report again.
Thank you, Chair. This report outlines the proposal for the Council to take responsibility for the future provision of housing support services and sheltered housing services at Angela Way, Uddingston. Angela Way is a sheltered housing development owned and managed by Blackwood Housing Association. The association currently receives funding from the Council to provide the current housing support service. In November 2020, Blackwood Housing Association announced and contacted the Council indicating that they intended to withdraw from providing this service. It's then been proposed that the Council take direct responsibility for providing the sheltered housing service to tenants at Angela Way. As a major provider of sheltered housing services already to both Council and some housing association tenants, this service will fit in well with the current arrangements that we have in place. As noted in section 5 and 6, using the housing support funding that previously went to Blackwood, it's proposed that we increase the establishment by 1 full-time equivalent sheltered housing officer. We have let the local elected members be aware of this proposed change, and also Blackwood Housing Association have been engaging with their tenants. The committee is then asked to approve that the Council assumes responsibility for this service from the 1st of April, and that the staff and establishment for the resource be increased by 1 full-time equivalent sheltered housing officer as detailed at 5.2 be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annette. Are there any questions? If there are none, I'll move the recommendations.
Second that.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda item 15, which is in relation to the implementation of the new integrated housing and property management system. And Annette will speak to this report again.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides committee with an update on the progress of the implementation of the new integrated housing and property management IT system. and it seeks approval for changes to the establishment required to support the ongoing development and implementation of the new system. As noted in section 2 of the report, Arion UK were appointed as the supplier of the new IT system, which will replace 11 outdated or legacy systems that we have in place. An initial implementation plan was developed and an indicative timeframe of November 2020 was in place for us to be able to maybe start activating parts of the new system. However, as noted in section 4, the programme has been severely impacted by COVID-19, and a revised plan now anticipates that the first phase of the project will be pushed back into 2022. Committee previously approved the appointment of a project team to work on the development of the new system, and we noted at that time we might have to come back to committee. So, as noted in the report, it's reported that existing temporary resources that we have in place be extended, and that we further add to that 3 temporary assistant posts. Details of the employee and financial implications are noted in section 6 and 7, and provision for the employee costs has been included within the resource budget. Committee is asked to approve that the progress with the procurement and the implementation of the new system be noted, and that the temporary changes to the establishment as detailed in section 6 be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annette. Are there any questions? Yes, I see Councillor Carmichael's hand is up.
Chair, sorry about that. The gremlins up here have come on my laptop here, and I'm trying to remove the hand. Apologies.
No problem. Are there any further questions? If there are none, I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And as the next 4 items are for noting, I propose that we agree the recommendations of the remaining agenda items as a block. Have we agreed?
Agreed. Agreed.
I presume that's the technical gremlins raising your hand again, Councillor Carmichael. Okay, Councillor McGavigan, I note that your hand's up, and also Councillor Fulton. I'll take Councillor McGavigan first.
Okay, thanks, Chair. It's just a point on agenda item 16 on the mainstreaming equality and diversity, and it's a question about language. At 4.12.1, there was Gypsy Traveller Culture Awareness Sessions, and I'm just wondering if it could be looked into as to whether Gypsy Travellers is the correct language we should be using. Should we not be moving to Gypsy Traveller Communities, as that would be much more accurate, considering only 3% now travel, and there's such diverse communities in terms of custom, traditions and beliefs. And I'd appreciate if it could be checked if that would be more culturally aware and more appropriate from the time that we are now in, that it could be Gypsy Travellers Communities rather than just Gypsy Travellers.
Okay, my understanding is that the language included within the report is the language that is currently used by the government, but I'm sure we can have that checked out and referenced in future reports. Colin, and I appreciate your comment.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a couple of points on agenda item 19, page 117211. The contracts awarded by the consultancy services in Appendix A. The consultancy services, is that an in-house thing or is that a private sector company?
Thank you, Alan. Danny, would you like to come
in? That's an in-house service, Councillor Faulkner. So that's previously what would have been our design services. So that's our in-house arrangements of project managers, architects, surveyors, engineers, etc.
Another question, Chair.
Okay.
Page 119, third from the bottom, new build housing and new community care facility at St Joseph's. You may be, my colleagues may be aware, I raised at the Executive Committee in January when we were informed that this project was costing £6 million. I understood it was £4 million. 3 days later, I got an email from the finance director telling me the project was costing £8 million. I now see that we're up to £14.2 million about the project, and I notice there's no mention of the student accommodation, which was in the original application. There was some information.
Yep, thank you, Alan. Danny, would you like to come in?
Thanks, Councillor Falconer, again for your question. So the question that I think you asked many months ago was in relation to the care facility itself. And if you remember, then that this project not only has a care facility and technology-enabled homes, it also has a range of housing on the site as well, which is why you've got two different project references there. So you've got an HOD number, which is a housing reference number in relation to the project for the supply housing on the site, and then you've got an SOD reference as well, which relates to the social work, the care facility. So when you asked the question, I think you specifically asked about the care facility, which therefore wouldn't have taken in the whole range of housing that would have been on that site as well. So just in terms of your general housing stock. And in relation to the title itself, the title is just the broad title of the works in there. It doesn't give you the whole specification of the work or what each of the spaces are going to be utilised for.
Thanks for that, Chair. Can I just put a supplementary there? So
yes.
If the care facility was £8 million, there's £6.25 million left. How many houses is that for?
Thank you. Danny, would you like to respond?
I would. I'm thinking off the top of my head here now, get back into that project. Frank will probably have the detail. I think it was 35, but I'm guessing at that. So I'll pass it. I can double check it, and I can double check it, and I'll send you the whole
45
of the facilities. 44.
45.
45 it is. Sorry.
Okay, thanks for that, Chair. Thanks, Danny.
No problem. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, can we agree the remaining recommendations?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. And as there are no urgent agenda items, I would close today's meeting and thank you all for your attendance.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chair.
Chair. Take care, everybody.
Yes.
Bye. God bless you.
Thanks, Chair. Bye.